Welcome back to On Record PR. I'm one of your hosts, Jennifer Simpson Carr, and today we are digging into a topic that is coming up more and more in conversation with clients and colleagues and generally in the industry, but hasn't really been fully understood yet. And what that is the role of Newswires in what are called generative engine results. And joining me today to talk about all of this is Sarah Larson, our Executive Vice President. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. There's a lot I'm looking forward to learning.
Great.
So, you oversee our public and media relations team. You also, with Gina, lead our crisis, litigation, communications, incident response team. So, you wear a lot of really important hats at the agency as a leader, but also someone who is very closely involved in how communications and content impact our clients' brands and reputation. So I know you and the team spend a lot of time thinking about how brands show up in search, how they're impacted by our media relations efforts, and now there's another layer around AI-driven platforms. So can we start at a very basic level by just defining what generative engine results are?
Sure. So I think by now most people are familiar with search engine results. In the grand old days of 2023, we used to go to Google and we'd type in a question and it would return a list of pages. I think it's 10 results on the page. And of course, over the decades, what appeared and where it appeared changed. But in essence, it was Google saying, okay, you've asked me a question or you're looking for this information. Here are websites that might have that information for you. The next generation of artificial intelligence has now brought us to generative AI. So when you go to Google and you ask a question, now its AI up at the top will give you the answer. So we started seeing kind of foreshadowing of this a few years ago with, I think at the time, I have to ask Leslie, I think it was called like no-click results is what we were
Zero
talking
click
about.
search results.
Yeah,
Yep.
zero click searches. So that's what we were talking about last year and the year before. But now it is full on, like AI is answering your question. That's within Google, but there are also, of course, many other generative AI engines. ChatGPT gets a lot of press. Claude, I think, is another one. Jasper is one that we used to use. I don't use that as much anymore. But anyway, all of these are generative AI engines. So when you ask it a question, what it gives back to you is now what we're calling generative engine results, GER.
So this is a big change, and it's one that's been happening very quickly. And to think about its impact is what really is driving the conversation today, which is that generative engine results are determining what information they are using to summarize the results and the information that they share with a searcher. And as you said, it's before they ever click.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, a lot of this is happening in real time. So we are learning these things as we go. We're testing, we're trying, we're experimenting, we're recording the results, just like you do in any scientific experiment. When I did this happened. What we're seeing is that generative engine results are looking to summarize information to answer the user's question by pulling information from a wide variety of sources. They tend to go to and cite trusted reference publications. So in internet speak, they have high domain authority scores. The internet sees them as valuable and credible and often neutral third parties. The generative engines look for clarity, authority, and consistency over keywords and rankings. When we first started doing SEO, search engine optimization for clients 15 years ago, some of the bad black hats at the beginning were keyword stuffing. So you'd go into a web page and you know it if you see it, right? It's like those awkward phrasings, like they posit the website content to answer a question and then they force that phrase into everything. Their goal was to try to come up higher in search, right? Well, the machines have moved long past that, and they are very good at trying to figure out what the user intent is. Now, what we're finding is, again, this is happening really, really quickly, but the those generative engine results are now shaping perception because they're deciding what facts, what brands, what voices to include in those answers. So for our clients, for any brand, what that means is we need to start paying attention to how we break into become a source for those results.
So it's surfacing a really interesting change because not only does this resurface the importance of newswires, but we're also seeing this play out with rankings
Mm-hmm.
and other publications, awards,
Yep.
because of the factors that you mentioned. So this is a pretty big shift for PR teams. Can you
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit more about what it means when it relates to visibility and how we think about guiding our clients and law firms?
It's been really clear to me for a number of years now that as PR professionals, we really have two very different audiences. We have a human audience, which is the journalist or the reporter or the blogger, the influencer, the person we are trying to get to, but we also have the machine. So we are crafting communications to get the attention of both humans and machines. And sometimes that requires different types of content, and sometimes it requires caring about things that maybe seem like basics. Or we work with a lot of lawyers and law firms. Obviously, that's kind of our professional services niche. And lawyers are famous for coming back and saying, well, this is just a really basic argument. And, why should I put the time into drafting this content? Everybody already knows this. Well, no, not everybody already knows this. And if it doesn't exist online, it doesn't exist. So we are both simultaneously continuing with the traditional media pitching that we've always done. And then we are also looking at things like press releases announcing awards going on the newswire, because then you're taking this industry recognized award or honor, you're turning it into a news release, you're publishing it on, say, PR Newswire, which has a very high domain authority. And even if that never gets to a human, just the fact that it is published out on the internet through a high domain authority news vehicle gives that piece of information gravitas and communicates to Claude, ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot. This is a good source of information. You might want to include this in the future.
And so newswires, at least the last several years, have, from my perspective, really been seen as a very simple distribution tactic. And so some firms are happy to invest in them. Other firms don't want to spend the few $100s to push the information out even further. It sounds to me now like they are kind of increasing again in terms of the strategic value that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a number of years, especially, a decade or so ago, we really judged our results by how many news stories we got from individual journalists. That still does matter, and it does matter for different types of stories more than others, but just as important to building this online footprint for a client is these distributions on the newswire, which may or may not ever land in front of human eyes, but they will come up in a Google search. They will come up as a citation in a generative engine result. They will live there for a long time, and they will come up high in those results, again, because that newswire website has a very high domain authority and is seen as trustworthy and a good source of information. So we used to advise clients to use the wire only when it was super important news, because it's an additional cost. We have a subscription to a certain newswire. There are several of them. And so we are able to access that service at a lower cost. We pass that lower cost on to the client, but it's still a cost. It's an out-of-pocket cost. So 5 years ago, we would look and say, well, does this justify a recommendation for our client to spend an extra $250 or whatever it might be to publish this on the newswire? And we would really reserve them for kind of the highest profile news. Now we're almost shifting to, let's consider 75% of what we do as important enough to be put out on the wire, because every little bit of information that we are able to publish in that way expands the online presence for that client. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. And I want to encourage our listeners to check out our show notes because we have gone into detail on several of our episodes about the change and the shift to GEO and in greater detail why it matters, how it structures. So if this is a new concept to you, that could be a really helpful foundation. And also, we had a great interview with Becky Bergman, our Director of Media Relations, who talks about how this impacts what you said, Sarah, which is not just the human eyes that are going to see something, but now these machine eyes, if you will.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
let's pause here for a message from our sponsor, and when we get back, let's talk about the practical approaches that we can recommend for PR leaders and what's actually changing in the day-to-day.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses worldwide. With an expert team positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by an international faculty, Furia Rubel enhances our clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com.
So, Sarah, we're back from our sponsor message. Let's dive into the practical. What should PR leaders actually be doing differently in light of everything we're talking about today?
So we've really seen Newswires specifically, since that's what we're talking about today, kind of shift from being seen as a distribution platform to being seen as an authority figure, an authority signal, if you will, to the machines, the machine overlords. So what that means tactically is instead of reserving, your most important news is the only thing that you'll consider putting on the newswire, think more broadly about what it is that you want the world to know about your law firm or about your, professional services firm, whatever your brand is. Do you want them to know about awards, even if it's not for the CEO? Let's say it's for an entire practice group. Well, of course you want the world to know that, right? So we would recommend drafting a press release. We pitch it to the legal industry trades that often will pick those kinds of things up. We put it on the website, we share it on social media, we share it in their newsletters. But now let's add another step and put that out on the wire, because the language that comes up in those releases is really structured and easy for the machines to read, right? We're making things easy for the machines to find. So it's a trusted high authority source sharing information that is easy for the machine to read, condense, articulate as, yes, this is someone who can answer a question. And that increases the chances of that client's name, brand, service appearing in these results that we've been talking about.
So it's really about giving the machines, which we keep calling the machines, but giving the machines the information you want it to consider and know about your firm or your organization. So can you give us, I know you gave the awards examples, but can you give us another example that might be relevant to a law firm or even a legal tech company?
Some examples of types of news that would qualify for that. Again, product launches. I love data. Journalists love data. So if you've got, let's say it's a law firm that's expanding, we want to do an announcement, not just of that expansion or that merger or that acquisition, but give some data. How many attorneys does that now make for your intellectual property practice? How many does that make for your land use practice based in Irvine, California? Like specific information and data to populate the web and signal, again, give that authority signal to the generative engines. Presentations, speaking engagements, anytime your executives or leaders are giving a presentation, do a release about that. Share some of the information that's going to be in the talk. Don't just give the name of the talk. Like, why should people care about this? If it's important enough for you to be giving a talk about, put it into a news release and publish it on the wire. Anniversaries, corporate milestones, if you've received the Lifetime Achievement Award, all of those things are really important to consider as news sources to go out on the wire.
And for our listeners, I want to put one of your examples into context because I think it's really important. And sometimes when we're discussing these concepts, for someone like me, I'm very visual. So, to your example about an IP group acquiring a specific number of attorneys in a specific office, that information is something that you will see in this context come up in a search result. So, for example, if you were to type in information about this firm's IP practice, the result you get will likely show the number of attorneys in that group, perhaps where a majority of those attorneys reside in what office. And so to your example about specific data, it's really important to have that so that the result that is shared on Google is able to pull that specific data into the search result along with other
Precisely.
credible sources.
Precisely. And again, a lot of our clients think some of this is just really basic and boring. Well, maybe it is, but what we're doing is we're building a house. We are building a house in the online world, and you can't just go decorate the ceiling. You have to put up the walls first. You have to put up the staircase before you can get to the second floor. We have to build some of these basic building blocks in the online world that establish your authority. So these generative engines, they don't establish authority for you, but they reflect it. And so they want to go find it in other sources. So when we put a press release out on the wire, to your example, that talks about, let's say it's a corporate law firm, a boutique corporate law firm based in New York City. And in the release, we talk about how many lawyers do this kind of law, how many do this kind of law. Well, 2 months from now, somebody who's looking for, I'm an in-house attorney looking for a corporate bankruptcy attorney in the New York area, but I know I'm going to need a team. I need a law firm that has at least 7 partners that specialize in this. But all the information that we're putting out later comes back to help that machine answer that question. So the more data we have to share in those releases, the better positioned our brands will be.
And you bring up a great point we haven't talked about, and I just want to mention that the generative engines are now positioned to answer questions. So essentially, companies are finding that humans are asking questions now instead of just searching a word or a phrase. And so
Yep.
the example you just gave is very demonstrative of what someone may actually be searching for when they're considering assessing outside counsel.
Yep.
So, as we look ahead, what does all of this mean for the future of public relations?
Good question. I think overall, we could talk about this for hours. We'll probably come back and talk about this again next month and the month after that, because that's pretty much all everybody is talking about now in our professional world. But I think the thing that I want people to take away most from this conversation is that the future of PR really is about authority, accuracy, and presence, establishing presence. So it's not just about the metrics. It's not just about how many people have seen this. It's not just about how many subscribers does this website have that I appeared on. Those things are still relevant, but more important now is the generative engines reward brands that consistently show up, not just once, not just twice, but consistently show up over time as trusted sources. And good, effective use of PR, including Newswires, is an important part of building that presence.
So, follow-up question to that. This sounds like at some point it could be a fairly large undertaking for firms and organizations to produce the volume of content to maintain their online reputation and presence. Do you see this becoming a role within organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it already is. I think look, a lot of the really big law firms, the AmLaw 50s, they've got their own AI systems internally that they've got 7 people on an IT team that are building their own internal application. So the thing that I think is going to be important for mid-sized law firms, especially, and smaller law firms, is to understand who their target audience is, and where they hang out, what they read. That's kind of always been a tenet of PR. Like, you need to know where your audience is, but you also have to recognize at the same time that your audience is also everywhere online. So strategic use of these distribution tools, these authority signals, is going to be really important if you want to remain viable.
There's a lot that you have given our listeners to think about. And as you said, these things are changing so quickly, and it is such a big part of the strategy around communication. So I have no doubt that we will be back recording on this and kind of the next evolution, probably very near in the future.
Yeah.
But I think this is a great place to stop, because you've given everyone a lot to think about. So I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If this conversation has sparked questions about how you show up in the world, online, the online world, please feel free to send us an email, or if you have topics that you would like us to cover, you can reach us at podcasts@onrecordpr.com. And to close the show, I just want to note that we ended last year, 2025, with law firm mergers as a hot topic, and that conversation has not slowed in 2026. So we will be back on the next episode with Gina to discuss communications planning and strategy for law firm merger announcements, and all of the tools and tactics that you will need as you think about how to protect confidentiality, how to lead your internal teams, and all of the other considerations for M&A communications before, during, and after that document is signed, that it's official. So Sarah, thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Isabel Horan and Christian Yamula. Visit www.onrecordpr.com for resources and more information.